sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
Welcome to Rabbi on the Sidelines. This is Rabbi Sherman of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. This week we are joined by Major League Baseball insider from ESPN, author of New York Times bestseller book, The Arm, and we look forward to hearing from Jeff Passan. Jeff, it's so great to have you. Thanks for spending some time.
Thank you for having me, Ayers. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so today is actually the holiday of Purim on the Jewish calendar, and we celebrate miracles. I happen to be a rabbi in Los Angeles, and today is a miraculous day because Freddie Freeman has signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers. If you judge by likes on Twitters, I believe already 37,000 people have liked your tweet saying the Dodgers have the best lineup in the last 20 years that you have covered baseball. Tell us about this miraculous moment for the Los Angeles Jewish community and the Dodgers.
It's huge. I mean, Freddie Freeman is one of the most consistent players in Major League Baseball, and the fact that he's coming off a World Series win in Atlanta and ends up with the Dodgers just, I think, speaks to how the allure and the pull of the Dodgers is as strong as it is. I think that any player looks at what the Dodgers have and says, I want to be part of that. And after Matt Olson got traded to the Braves, I don't know if it was specifically written that Freddie Freeman was going to end up with the Dodgers, but it always made the most sense. And when they went to 6 years and $162 million, it was a done deal.
So Dodgers, actually, we win the World Series during the pandemic. What do you think about this coming year? And why should we go out to Dodger Stadium, Cesar Chavez Ravine? What are we going to see this year?
You're going to see a devastating lineup. You're going to see a great starting staff. You're going to see depth. And I'll tell you, those 9 games they play against San Francisco Giants, those 9 games they play there against San Diego Padres, those are going to be something to behold. It's just a really good division in the National League West now. And I know you've got Arizona and Colorado, and the Rockies going out and signing Chris Bryant was big for them. But it's really a 3-team race at this point. And I think San Diego is going to be a lot better than it was last year. But the Giants and going out and signing Carlos Rodon, bringing back Anthony Desclafani and Alex Wood to join Logan Webb in the rotation, and the Padres, even though Fernando Tatis Jr. broke his wrist and is out for a while, there's still a lot of talent there. And I think they're going to be in it. And remember, there's an additional playoff spot this year as well. So there's going to be ample opportunity for 3 playoff teams to come out of the West.
So what I think I'm really hearing is that there's going to be some competition on Yom Kippur and the Dodgers this year. Is that correct?
I sure hope so. And listen, I have had plenty of Yom Kippur where there has been competition, and I've been extremely hungry throughout it. But I would love to see a great Yom Kippur playoff series.
Well, if you are out here, you're welcome to Sinai Temple for Yom Kippur, and we can do a quick trip to Dodger Stadium. I don't know if you know the famous story of the man that comes to the rabbi and saying, I have actually a dilemma. There's Kol Nidre and the game, or Yom Kippur and the game, and the rabbi says, you can tape it. He says, great, thanks, I'll tape the service. And in today's world, we can do that, but I think we can live in the best of both worlds.
Listen, I have experience with that as a child growing up in Cleveland. I was the one who snuck in my Walkman to shul on Yom Kippur and snaked some earbuds up my suited arm, and I had an earbud in my hand, and I was just leaning on it like that to listen to the Cleveland Indians playoff game. I think it was 1995, maybe. I might be getting my years wrong, but I definitely I was not a great Jew. I got to be honest, not a great Jew that year. And let me ask this: if you saw me out in the congregation listening to a baseball game, how much would you judge me, and would my sins be forgiven?
Right, this is my show to ask you these questions. But I actually want to pick up on that because I do want to talk about faith in sports and specifically baseball. Just this past week, I had Josh Rawitch, president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, on. and he actually spoke about faith in sports. But actually, I told him the same story that I'm going to tell you. That Rabbi Solomon Schechter, the first conservative rabbi in this country 100 years ago, told his students that you cannot be a rabbi in America without knowing how to speak about baseball. Because baseball is the American experience. And if you're going to speak to American Jews, you have to understand the American experience. Maybe if you can, you probably never heard that story, but can you comment on that in terms of the American experience and what it means to us as Jews, but also as America? What does the sport mean to us?
I think the evolution of the sports meaning has been interesting because baseball, remember, has been for the longest time referred to as the national pastime, and I think any sports fan who wants to acknowledge reality now would say that football is America's pastime in 2022. So baseball's changed to more of a local sport, but I think um, the nature of that and the parochialism that comes from that does give it a different type of meaning than it once did. You know, not everybody is necessarily tuning in to playoff baseball games, but if your team is in it, if your city is part of it, if your community can
Mm-hmm.
rally around it, that to me is where sports, regardless whether it's baseball, football, basketball, hockey, soccer, you know, any professional sport, men's or women's, is going to have a community rallying around it. And I think that's the parallel with religion. You know, people talk about sports as religion all the time. And I think they say that because it brings out the same types of emotions.
Yes.
People see in sports, you know, I'm not trying to be blasphemous by any means, but they see it as a godly pursuit. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never looked at it that way. I've always tried to have a healthier perspective on it. But if there is anything that gets people riled up like religion, it's sports. And if there's anything that gets people arguing or talking, it's sports. And so the parallels there are very clear, I think.
So take it to the positive, though. In talking about community, we argue about sports. But what have you seen in your 20 years of covering baseball that has made a deeper impact off the field than what you see on the field? Players reaching out to communities, both during tragedy and even during good times. What have you seen that says, and that's what religion is about. In Judaism,
Right.
tikkun olam. It's the social action piece. It's what you do with the blessings that you have been given that allow you to improve the world out there. What have you seen that you say, you know what, this is a story that needs to be told?
I mean, I think there's just the opportunity, the platform that you get being a baseball player or an
Mm-hmm.
athlete, regardless. And I don't know if it's earned so much as it's given, but the fact is, people will listen to professional athletes, whether it's on social issues or in the middle of tragedies. Seeing, you know, what J.J. Watt and Houston Astros players did after the hurricane hit Houston. Seeing somebody like Drew Robinson, who I wrote a story on last year, who attempted suicide, lived,
Wow.
and now is an advocate for mental health and working with the San Francisco Giants organization and really trying to destigmatize the whole idea that you know, being sad, being depressed is some sort of a character flaw. No, it's brain chemistry, and a lot of times it's just a lack of knowledge what to do. And the ability to leverage sports into greater social good,
Mm-hmm.
to me, is what makes it such a special thing. And for all of the craziness we see from fans, there are good things that come out of professional sports, and ones that a lot of times are done behind the scenes just because people don't want to take that credit or feel like they're trying to go out there and uh, get get praise for doing things that just come naturally to them.
So for the last year and a half, I've interviewed people within the sports world, journalists and athletes and owners and even fans. And this idea of mental health keeps coming up. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago with one of the Giambi brothers passing away. What toll does that take on athletes? And it wasn't spoken about probably 20 years when you got into this business. And now it is.
No.
And what is that message actually to young people who are under such pressure? And we'll talk about the book, The Arm, in a minute. Such pressure to succeed. Um, how do we bring that idea of mental health, saying it's okay to feel hurt and it's okay to get help?
Yeah, it's what Drew says. It's okay to not be okay. And I think that's the sort of message that transcends the sports world, and why Drew feels like he has such a powerful message to share. And it's something that I see with my own son, who's 14 years old and plays competitive baseball. And you try and pass on the idea that this is not life and death. This is a game, but this is also a game that can teach you things. And it's a game from which you can learn a lot of really good life lessons about perseverance, and about effort, and about work, and about all these other things that sports gives you, even if you don't recognize it in the moment or don't understand that it's what's going on. And that that's a gift, I think, that sports provides the people who play it, and even the people who watch it. That these things that you learn being on a team and caring about others, they translate into so many other areas of life. And chances are you're not going to be a professional athlete, but that's okay, because the things you learned as an amateur athlete will behoove you during your adulthood.
Absolutely. So take us back to your journey. You're the senior MLB insider. You know the scoop on basically everything. People look to you, but how'd you get there? You're a Syracuse University grad. You covered all the sports. It's a sad day here to talk to you, and our Syracuse Orange are sitting at home. But what was that path? You covered basketball, football, lacrosse, all different stories, but now you've become the man. As a kid, was it baseball? Was it sports? Did you see yourself in this moment?
No, I never anticipated that I was going to be on TV. I mean, look at me. Like, it's still weird. But my dad worked at a newspaper in Cleveland for 42 years. So I had just assumed that I was going to be a newspaper person my whole life, but the business changed, and I started my career off at the Fresno Bee and went to the Kansas City Star. So college basketball the first 2 years, baseball those next 2 years, and then I went to Yahoo Sports, where I had 15 excellent years, and I've been at ESPN for the last 3 and change now, and I have the best job in the world. Like, no offense to you or anyone else, but I get to write about baseball for a living. So
but I get to speak about baseball.
Yeah, that's true. It's a fair point.
Actually, I had Dan Schulman on last year during the pandemic while he was doing basketball, obviously the Blue Jays announcer, ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. And he said, if you love what you do, then you do what you love. And I think that's so true. You were on the Jim Rome show just a couple of weeks ago, obviously speaking about the lockout. We'll just talk about that for a moment. But let's listen to this about why you love baseball, and we'll chat about that.
Love baseball. I really love baseball, not just because I've spent 20 years doing this job. I love everything about baseball, that it is a thinking person's game, that you can have athleticism and you can have power, and there's so many different elements. You don't have to be 6'3", 220 or 6'11". You can just be a 5'7" guy, or in Jose Altuve's case, a 5'5" guy who can go bat to ball and become a superstar. But the game's pace right now, it doesn't work long term. It's just not sustainable. And I think the fact that MLB right now is more focused on trying to tamp down on the players than it is prioritizing the product on the field is concerning.
So it's a game for everybody. Let's chat about that for a moment. 5'7", 6'3", doesn't matter what you look like. Baseball is an equalizer. Thoughts?
It's what makes it so great to me. I mean, I'm a 5'9" Jew, and I played. There's just it's open to the world, and I don't just mean that in a sense of how big you are or how strong you are, but there are players from Japan, from Cuba, from the Dominican Republic, from Venezuela. The baseball is played everywhere, and I understand the universality of basketball, especially with the inroads that it's made in China, has changed that sport a little bit, and how it's really got a grip on Europe. But baseball is the most popular sport in Japan and down in the Caribbean and in parts of South America for a reason, because I think it's similar to soccer in that regard, honestly, in that physical size matters less than skill. And if you have skill, you can play the game and play it at a really high level.
So let's talk about Japan for a moment. In your book, if you haven't read this book, The Arm, Jeff Passan's New York Times bestseller, Inside the $1 Billion Mystery, the most valuable commodity in sports. I've been pointing to this all week long, the UCL. I learned more about the UCL in this book than I'll ever want to know, even though before being a rabbi, I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. But my kid's 8 years old and he's playing Little League. And I guess after this book, thank God he's on first base. Tell us about this UCL and the idea that we keep doing damage to our elbows and needing Tommy John surgery at the age of 13 and 14. Is there a cure? And first, let's talk about the problem. And then is there a cure to make sure that we can do a little better?
I don't know what it says about me that my 14-year-old's a pitcher. So maybe I'm just a crazy one, honestly. But the ulnar collateral ligament is a small triangular band of flesh inside of your elbow. It holds together your upper and lower arm bones. And throwing a baseball quite often causes it to fray and eventually snap. And Tommy John, the great Dodgers pitcher of the 1970s and 80s, I mean, he pitched forever, had the first ulnar collateral ligament replacement surgery. And Dr. Frank Jobe, the renowned orthopedic surgeon at the Curl and Jobe facility in Los Angeles, did it. And they didn't know at the time whether it was going to work or not. In fact, after Tommy John surgery, there were 10 other guys who had it, and it didn't work. So this was something that was experimental at the time, but has wound up almost being a rite of passage for some players, because the combination of stress and strain on this ligament, you almost need to be a freak not to eventually need the surgery. Even someone like Justin Verlander, who threw thousands of innings, ultimately needed Tommy John and is going to be coming back from that this season. So it's the sort of thing that unfortunately has been happening earlier and earlier. A lot of the problem is overuse at a young age. And so when I say my 14-year-old's a pitcher, he's been a pitcher for a while now, but we've had limits on him because kids' bodies are growing. And the competitive nature of youth sports is antithetical to the health of the players who are out there. And unfortunately, parents sometimes get delusions of grandeur, and those delusions lead them to believe that winning a youth tournament at 10 or 11 or 12 years old is worth sacrificing the future health of the kid going out there and trying to help them win it. And it's as much as we're learning about the arm now, as much as we know about the arm already, it's ultimately going to be on parents and on coaches and on their willingness to look long term rather than try and do something in the short term.
That's interesting we say about the parents, because it's interesting within the Jewish tradition, in the Torah, it says actually the sin of the parents shouldn't be upon the children. And often, right, I mean, I'm watching Little League and parents are shouting at we just got an email this week, hey parents, it's T-ball.
Chill.
The umpires are going to be okay. It's T-ball. We're learning the foundations. How much do you see actually on these young players? I mean, some of these guys are going into the minors, the majors, 18, 19 years old. Is it the love of the game for these young people, or is often these parents that are pushing them to that limit?
I mean, it depends. For some of them, it certainly is. The ones who are lucky enough to have parents with a healthy outlook and attitude about the whole thing, I think, really benefit from it. For some, at a very young age, it's turned into a business, and that's sad. I've said this to my kid a million times. The second you don't love baseball anymore, you can stop. Now, I don't think you should, because
1 minute. We just lost you. Oh, there you go. You there? Oh, can't hear you. 1 second. Can you hear us?
We
back? There we go.
Yeah,
we're back. We're back. Great.
Yeah, my wife was trying to call there, so
no worries.
That's what happens. I think that it's a healthy thing to let your kids make decisions, but it's also important for them to understand seeing something through and following the talent that they have and trying to maximize it. So it's always just a balance, and it's a hard one to strike.
Absolutely. So when we talk about balance, I want to talk about actually a player that has a pretty amazing balance on the field, Shohei Ohtani, basically today's Babe Ruth. and you got into a little healthy disagreement with Stephen A. Smith about his role and actually his ability to speak English and what it means to play this sport in America. So let's watch this clip and we'll talk about what Shohei Ohtani means to baseball, but also to America and bringing people together.
Shohei Ohtani came to this country at 23 years old. He left behind his family, he left behind his culture, he left behind his country. He left behind everything he knows to go and pursue the American dream. He wanted to come here and be great. And he is the sort of person who this show and who this network and who this country should embrace. We are not the ones who should be trafficking in ignorance. We are not the ones who should be perpetuating false ideas that, unfortunately, far too many people out there believe. We should look at Shohei Ohtani as a bastion of what this country and this sports world is about. And you know what he's done? He has reached that greatness. He has achieved that. He has found it here in America. And he's done so without speaking English publicly, and he's done so speaking English to his teammates.
I love the bold idea that Shohei Ohtani is somebody we should look up to. Maybe talk about what Stephen A. Smith said, and then why you came out and said that this is somebody, that story we need to tell in this great country of America.
Yeah, I listen, I think it's more about Ohtani here and the perspective that we have, and it's been around for a long time, is I think an unfair one. Just because somebody doesn't go out and speak a particular language doesn't take away in any way his ability to be magnificent and for us to appreciate the magnificence that he has. And Stephen A. and I had a really good talk about that day, I think. And I think he understands the perspective. I think I think what he wants, what everyone wants, is for somebody to be a big, bold personality, for somebody who's got the talent to have that personality to match. But when you don't, I think the talent is enough to carry the day. And that's what I was looking at with him. And I think Shohei Ohtani and what he's able to do to hit it at an elite level and pitch it at an elite level, it's incredible. I never thought I would see anything like it, because it's hard enough to hit it at an elite level. It's hard enough to pitch it at an elite level. To do both, I still ask myself, how? How does he do this? How does he balance this?
And so a couple of years ago, you actually wrote an article saying, I don't think he could do this. And then obviously you're proved wrong. Oops. But later on in that episode with Stephen A. Smith, I just want to play this clip real quick, because this goes back to what you said about judging you on Yom Kippur. That's why I didn't answer that now. I want to answer it through how you answered how we judge ourselves. So check this out.
I had my own moment 3 years ago with Shohei Ohtani where I had to apologize. Back in spring training, I wrote a column after talking with scouts that said Shohei Ohtani is going to have trouble hitting in the big leagues. And it fell on its face. And a month later, I didn't just write an apology. No, I think it was like a week later. I didn't just write an apology, Stephen A. What I did was I went back and I looked at what I had done wrong. I looked at, why did I write this? The people who I talked with, were they all a certain age, of a certain background, of a certain race? Did they all have the same sort of education and maybe fell to the same biases? I dissected what I did wrong. I did an autopsy on myself and how I approach things. And that's all I want anyone to ever do. And I appreciate us having this conversation is part of your autopsy.
There you go. You answered it yourself. I guess we call that tshuva in the Jewish religion, and that's what we do in the month leading up to the high holidays. We do an autopsy on our soul. Tell us about that moment of why you said, and the ability. That's not an easy thing to do. The ability to say publicly, I was not right in that moment.
I don't think it's a hard thing to do, because I think that if you show the ability to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, it's a whole lot more credible. And you gain credibility by acknowledging that you're fallible, you're human, you're going to make mistakes and errors. And the sooner you own up to them when it's clear that you've done it, the sooner, hopefully, people are going to see that, hey, this person's genuine. He's not going out there saying something just to get a reaction or just to say something.
Yes.
And I look at it as a responsibility. Like I want people to check what I have to say, and I want to be accountable to the audience that I do have, whether it's people who are seeing me on TV, reading, on Twitter, interacting with me, whatever it is. I'm lucky that they find my information or my opinions important enough to be a part of their lives.
Mhm.
And I think if I ignore the fact that I am nothing without them, then I'm doing myself and everybody else a disservice at that point. And so it's just like I'm not gonna pat myself on the back and say I've got great humility. What I will say is I think humility is an important thing,
Mhm.
and I think that the people who embrace that idea of humility, of fallibility, of being wrong, and of acknowledging when you are, it doesn't just lead to more credibility. I think it leads to happiness.
Mm.
Like if you see that you can you can be vulnerable enough to say I was wrong, and that people will embrace you still. I mean, what does that say about the beauty of humanity? I think it says everything.
So based on what you said there, I'm not sure if you were listening to the Cleveland game or to the Rabbi Sherman and Yom Kippur. That is an amazing. That is, I mean, that's exact. I love how baseball teaches that, but as we just talked about the parallel between sports and religion, that's exactly what faith teaches. Not to stand and say that I am right, because when you said, "How would you judge me?" Actually, it's exactly what you just said. It's how would we judge ourselves in our action, and then within the community. I love that you said that. Like, I am nobody if I am not within a community. So that is the answer to the question that you asked me earlier. And when we talk about community,
I think,
based,
and let me just say this:
yeah,
I definitely felt guilty about it, but the fact that I could tell everybody around me what the score was, they appreciated me. So I was part of that community that day.
no, and the intersection it is so crucial. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had Dr. Jeffrey Gurak, who is an American professor of American Jewish history, Yeshiva University. I'm not number one. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Yeshiva University basketball team and what's going on with them?
My uncle Stan, who is an ophthalmologist in New York, went to Yeshiva University and wrote a musical while there that I don't know if it was ever put on, but it's famous inside of my family for his Yeshiva musical.
But so their basketball team, they had a 50-game win streak. Ryan Terrell, actually, who was a
Yep.
junior, just declared for the NBA draft. And so all these ideas of faith in sports are literally coming together. But Professor Gurak actually he specifically looked at baseball. Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax, and then he compared it to the 1986 Mets. Because Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax, they took off
Yep.
Yom Kippur. It's very famous. But in 1986, actually, it was the Jewish community of New York that appealed to the Mets to move the game earlier so that they all could actually
Right.
go to shul. And so that sort of shift in baseball, baseball leading the way as opposed to actually the fans leading the way. And so this sort of back and forth, I think, is amazing. Actually, when the Dodgers played the Phillies, I think it was in 2011, Pedro was on the mound. There was like literally a minion of rabbis at that game. And we had to get back to Friday night services at 6 p.m. The rabbi that I was working with, we literally walked in the door at 5:59, and we lit those Shabbat candles, and the Dodgers won. So it was good all around. But baseball is connected to American history as well. And two of those things that I really saw when Dan Schulman was doing the Sunday night baseball game. I don't know if you remember this, when Osama bin Laden was captured. And he's
Yep.
telling me that in one ear, he's listening to the producer say, keep going. In the other ear, he's saying, tell the American audience that Osama bin Laden's been captured. Have you captured any of those moments that you realize that baseball and American history actually come together? And what was that like, telling the story to the American people?
Yeah, I mean, the first World Series I covered was in 2004 when the Boston Red Sox, after 86 years, finally won a championship. In 2016, when the Chicago Cubs, after more than a century, finally won a championship. It's hard to know that you're witnessing history in the
Mm-hmm.
moment. But when it's something as obvious as that, it ratchets the pressure up, certainly, because I know that I'm privileged enough to be one of the people who are going to be telling the story of what it was like on that
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And 25 or 50 years down the road, there are going to be people reading the stories that I wrote, or the things that watching the things I said on TV. And uh, that's the best part of the job, honestly. Just knowing that you're the stenographer of history,
Yeah.
and having the privilege of telling that, and the responsibility of telling that too, because you don't want to tell a version of it that's biased or wrong.
Right.
You want to tell the most accurate version of it, and the one that for generations hopefully can be repeated.
Actually, so you mentioned the word generations, and if you go to the Baseball Hall of Fame, I'm assuming you've been to Cooperstown many times. Thankfully, growing up in Syracuse, it was an annual pilgrimage for my family and I.
Yeah.
But when you go there, there's a new film, actually, it's called Generations. What does baseball mean to the generations of passing down the sport, but really the tradition? Because that's what actually, outside of our synagogue, there's a big sign that says Lador Vador, from generation to generation. And every kid stands up and says, this is what I'm doing. And it seems like that's what you're doing, as you said, being the stenographer of history. It's actually the commandment of Passover, to tell your story on that day to the future generations. How do you see your role in that?
I mean, it's an important one. And I think that baseball, more than any game, is one that's passed down. It is the game of fathers and sons, of parents and children. And, a lot of times I think baseball can get a little bit stuck in that idea. And because it's so tethered to history, it can get in its own way and almost looks self-important, self-serious. But the reality is, it's the intergenerational connection that I think really makes it different from other sports and makes it as special as it is.
And so when you say the intergenerational connection, what is the difference between, for instance, last year's generation or last generation and this generation with the pitch clock? And you've often said, baseball's boring and slow now, right? My kids sometimes like popcorn more than what's happening on the field. How do we either speed it up, or what's going to make it exciting for our children and their children?
I'm fine with the pitch clock. Like, listen, I watch 3 hour and 10 minute on average baseball games right now. And I'm like, I love baseball, but the commitment of 3 hours, 10 minutes on average for 162 nights a year,
Yes.
that's a lot. Like,
Yes.
I use this comparison.
LA traffic,
what if
too.
I
That's
told
like a
you
6-hour experience. Just letting you know.
Yeah. What if I told you that we're going to go to a movie this week, and that movie is going to be 3 hours, 10 minutes long? Your response would be, what kind of movie is worth me going to sit for 3 hours, 10 minutes? I understand 2 hours and 50 minutes that we're going to get down to with the pitch clock. It's still a really long commitment. But the point is more, go in the right direction. Baseball, time-wise, has been going in the wrong direction for a while now. And it's not just the time itself. It's the lack of action on the field. There's a real pace problem, I think, in baseball right now, where because there are so many strikeouts, because it's become a three true outcomes game with strikeouts, walks, and home runs, that action that existed, it's just fewer and farther between. And I think if it, I don't know if we're at the tipping point, but we're certainly at a point that it's awfully hard for young people who have just this on-demand world where they can go and get stimuli and input at any time they want, are meant to sit around and savor something or appreciate something or take it in. And maybe, listen, I'm not going to deny the fact that they're kids, right? Like, when have kids ever been patient? But the impatience of children now does not necessarily dovetail well with baseball.
Yes. So let's go back to Japan for a moment, because you wrote, and in this book, again, The Arm by Jeff Passan, amazing book. And it's not just about the arm, but it's about the philosophies of baseball. And one of those philosophies is called, I believe, Yakyu. And Yakyu, I believe, is baseball in Japan. And you're quoted as, or you wrote, Yakyu can explain life, how much you can be patient in the moment and make good use of those moments in life. Is there a difference between the philosophy of baseball in Japan and here? And maybe how can we bring that philosophy of being patient in the moment to America?
I don't know that we can, to be honest, and maybe that's just me being negative, but I think it's probably more me being realistic. There's almost a monastic calm in Japanese baseball, and this this idea that repetition is not just something that's going to help you perfect your craft, but that it's a duty. And the closest analog I have to that's actually not in the United States. It's in the Dominican Republic, where it's a different world. In Japan, the education system is great, and kids just spend after school, 360 days a year practicing to perfect. In the Dominican Republic, it's done at 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 years old, but with kids who have dropped out of school because their goal and their dream is to be a professional baseball player. And the easiest path to it is through that. And when you have an educational system like the Dominican Republic, a third world country, a country that's had a lot of corruption, has a lot of poverty, it's just a different mindset. And I think, the United States, the passion for sports is there, but the number of people who are grinding the way that they are in Japan, in the Dominican Republic, isn't quite the same.
Absolutely. So then what is your message to the child that sits here for his bar mitzvah when I say, what are your dreams? And I want to be a Major League Baseball player. How do you take that passion to the next level? Or do you maybe direct it to journalism?
Yeah. Do you want me to give the real answer, or do you want me to give the uplifting answer?
Let's do a little bit of both, because this is the Rabbi on the Sidelines. We're talking faith and reality.
All right. The real answer is you're probably not going to be a big league player, but there are plenty of opportunities to still play the game and still love the game and enjoy the game. And that's, I think the lockout, if you were really looking at it, taught us that, if we didn't know it already. There are plenty of forms of baseball, and Major League Baseball is the highest form. It's the most aesthetically pleasing form. It's the best form, but it's not the only one. And if you're playing baseball to be a big leaguer, maybe temper your expectations. If you're playing baseball to enjoy the game, to enjoy your friends, your teammates, the pursuit of excellence, all of those things, then that's the message. You don't play baseball to play in the big leagues. You play baseball to have fun and to learn just how far you can push yourself and how great you can be with the natural talent you have and the things that you learn along the way.
And so I want to ask you a question that if hopefully you're familiar with the Israeli Olympic baseball team, because I think that actually goes to what you said. It's about how to have fun, how to learn, and how to have pride. This past year, only 6 teams in the Olympics, one of them, the state of Israel. Many of those guys actually came from here in the United States. They made Aliyah based on the law of return. Any thoughts about what that meant, both to American Jews, but also to the land of Israel and really to the baseball world, to spread baseball a little further than America and Japan?
I mean, I knew a lot of people involved with the team, and there was pride. And this was not the type of pride you typically see in the Olympics. In the Olympics, there's usually pride that's tied to your country, your homeland. Here, it was pride tied to religion. It was pride tied to Judaism. And, listen, baseball, by its nature, is a very Christian sport. It's just the player population is overwhelmingly Christian. It's why we revere Sandy Koufax and Hank Greenberg the way that we do, because they're anomalies and their excellence really stands out. And so when you run into a Jewish ball player, it's like, hey, you exist. Like, see ya. And it's why why we see an Orthodox Jew getting drafted this year.
Yeah, Steinmetz.
Yes, Steinmetz getting drafted. And Ellie Kligman going in playing high Division I college baseball. I mean, there, it's not a sport. It's not a sport that is inhospitable to Jews necessarily, but it's not a sport that is overwhelming with them either. And so I think to see the team that Israel put out there and to see them be in the Olympics, it was a cool moment and a moment of pride for a lot of people.
There are actually a lot of Jews, obviously, in the ownership, the management world as well. One of those is Ben Zausmer, the assistant GM of the Mets, who actually started his career in statistics through the Oscars. And if you're familiar with what he did with the Oscars, do you know about that?
I am.
So, and by the way, Ben is actually married to a rabbi, which is pretty amazing. So a colleague of mine. So he definitely
I did not know.
Yes, moving to New York. And what is the role of statistics? When you look at Ben, he said, like, I'm not a baseball player. I love the game. I play Little League, but I love stats. And he talked earlier about skill and talent and God-given talent. But now statistics is really what it's about. And Ben can not only predict the Oscars, but it seemed like he can predict the Dodgers winning the World Series, which he helped them win. What is the role of statistics right now in like knowing what's going to happen? These guys have the crystal ball because they know the math can do the trick.
I mean, it's enormous. It's a way to take something that for the longest time we thought only could be really judged by the eye test, and to make it a much more comprehensive thing where the intangible, you try and quantify it, and quantifying the intangible, it seems like an oxymoron, but baseball, better than any other sport, I think, has done an incredible job of assimilating the numbers into the game, and the game has changed because of it. I mean, the reason you have as many strikeouts and as many home runs as you do these days is because they're valued and because the numbers say that they're important. And when the numbers say something is important in baseball in 2022, teams are going to follow that, even if it goes against conventional wisdom. There's just been too much success with numbers-oriented teams to ignore that.
So, two last questions. The first about the being an MLB insider. How do you become the MLB insider? You're the guy that breaks the news. Lockout's over. It's because of Jeff Passan. Freddie Freeman coming to the Dodgers. It's because of Jeff Passan. How does that actually work?
It's definitely not because of me. I'm just the person who takes what's going on and tries to put it out into the world in a timely and accurate fashion. And listen, I didn't think that I was going to be the news breaking guy. When I got into the business, I did it because I like telling stories about people. And that's what I did for a long time. But I also recognize that the people with long-term jobs tend to break news. And I had a family and children, and I wanted to ensure that they had a roof over their heads. So it was as much as anything a pragmatic decision to get into that area. But listen, it's fun being in the middle of all these high stakes things and trying to figure out what the story is, and getting a big story is an exhilarating thing too. So. There are some little tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, but in reality, it all just comes down to relationships, and you just need people to trust that the information they're giving you, you're going to handle it in the proper fashion. And I think through the years, I've illustrated to people that I take my job extremely seriously. I take the truth extremely seriously, and I'm not going to be frivolous or chasing engagement on Twitter or anything like that. The information is what matters, and disseminating it in a responsible fashion is of the utmost importance.
Actually, I love what you said. That's all faith based. It's relationship and it's trust, and that is what also I think people, when they join a community, whether it's sports or faith, that's what they're looking for. Somebody actually said, if you're going to join a faith community and you can't build 7 relationships, then it's not, then the faith community has not actually done justice to you. And I think the same thing is actually true in the sports world as well. Wow. Maybe one lesson of the lockout, what we can learn going forward, and maybe an inspiring story of what we can look for in the baseball season, maybe on the field and off the field.
Money is the root of all evil, And what we can learn going forward is that life is better with baseball. And I think we knew that already. I think we understood that. But after watching, after watching what essentially amounted to haggling over dollars, and there were some elements of the future of the game in there as well. But this was really a money fight. After seeing that, it's just nice to hear the crack of the bat, the pop of the
Yes.
mitt, have the sights and sounds and smells of a stadium, and realize that even if it's a week later than anticipated, baseball's back and we're all better for it.
And LA is going to be the host of the All-Star game. Is there somebody that we're not thinking about that we're going to see on the field this summer for the All-Star game at Dodger Stadium?
Are you asking me to predict All-Stars, Rabbi? Come on. I can't do that. They haven't gotten on the field this year yet. I'd say this.
So,
I think Freddie Freeman's going to be an All-Star for the Los Angeles Dodgers this year. How about that?
Amen. Amen. We are so thrilled to have Jeff Passan, Rabbi on the Sidelines, Major League Baseball insider for ESPN, author of New York Times bestseller, The Arm. Make sure you get your copy. We look forward to following you, following baseball, America's greatest pastime. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Have a good day.